Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today, we are back to the heart of the continent, and CTV Live reporter for Winnipeg, Ainsley McPhail, is joining us on today's show. Ainsley, I'm really excited to talk with you today because we have a tale of two cities involved between us, with going from Toronto to Winnipeg and vice versa. Thanks for joining me today.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
What has been your favorite part about living in Winnipeg so far?
Definitely the people. Everybody is so kind and friendly. Not that I didn't expect it, because I've lived in the prairies before and I've traveled the prairies before, but it is something else. I would say probably it's the kindest place I've ever lived.
Where else did you live in the prairies?
I lived in southern Alberta
Oh, okay.
in Lethbridge.
In Lethbridge. Okay.
But I've traveled through Saskatchewan before, and I've done comedy in pretty much all the small towns. Like Saskatchewan it's really close. It's really close, but I'd say the kindest people that I've experienced have been in Winnipeg.
Would you say that there is a similar humble and friendly hospitality around smaller towns outside of the GTA in Ontario, or would Kitchener not fall under that same category?
Kitchener is definitely more city life. In the smaller towns in Ontario, for sure, there's definitely that small town hospitality, but nothing. I haven't been to the Maritimes yet. That's the one that I haven't been to yet. So they're probably going to have some words about that. But yeah, no, nothing beats the prairie people, how kind they are.
Had you traveled to the prairies many times before moving out to work there, or was it your first experience after school?
That was it. That was the first time. It was a huge, like going from Toronto to southern Alberta to like ranching communities and coal mining towns was definitely a culture shock for sure. Like nothing like I've ever experienced.
What did you expect beforehand? And then what was it like after the fact?
Well, in southern Alberta, like there's definitely some mountains, but where I was living, it was more like just farming in the outside areas. So I got there and I was like, where's the mountains at? And you could only see them from the YMCA gym just slightly if it was a clear day in the town that I was living. So I'm like, you could kind of see, like I had to find the one spot on the west side of town that you could kind of see mountains. But I was like, I thought Alberta was just mountainous everywhere, but no, it was just a lot of farmland.
Prairie Life is definitely very culture shock-ish, if that's even a word, to people I know from Southern Ontario, considering that Ontario is so big and vast. There is lots of elements of the prairies within the province itself, but I find oftentimes, because people aren't exposed to the smaller towns, that the prairies seem like Oz until you show up. That's when you're really going to know what it's like to live there.
Yeah, the Wild West for sure. Like even the conversations that I would have with people and just a total 180. Like, yeah, it's weird though, because Canada's like that. It's like we're all so different, but we all share a lot of the things that are the same too. So that's cool.
What were some of the things that you were told beforehand that were not as you had expected or were not as advertised?
I guess just like things that I probably should have known going in, like the obvious things, like, oh, people would say, oh, like there's like all the oils in Alberta, yada, 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 which is true. Like that happens north, but I moved to southern Alberta. So I got there too. And I was like, oh, where's the oil at? And like, this is not, no, like geographically, when you're not from somewhere, I felt like an American, I guess. It's like there were so many things that should have been so obvious to me. And then I got there and I was like, oh yeah, okay, no mountains here, no oil here. Probably should have done a little bit more research.
You went to College of Sports Media for your broadcasting education. And as often said in the industry, it's important to be open and move to other places in order for you to get opportunities. Were there a lot of people that you went to school with who were in a similar boat to yourself that were gung-ho to move across the country, or were you one of the lone people that ventured thousands and thousands of kilometers west to find your first gig?
Definitely the thousands of kilometers west to find the first gig. I stayed in Toronto for a bit, where it was great, but and even like my mentors there were saying, go out west, get your experience, and then if life brings you home, life brings you home. So I was 22, like, so just so young. Even now I'm 20, I'm trying to do the math. I was like 22, 23. And so like, even now being so young, it just made sense to go out west to get my experience. Like Toronto's not going anywhere. And like, yeah, family's home, but at this age, why not experience another part of the country, more than one part of the country, and do what I love to do? Like, it's a no-brainer.
When you were in CSM, what were the specific goals that you would have had going into the school? And then how did you try to materialize them after the fact?
I I think I've accomplished a lot of the things that I've wanted to, having gone to CSM and then leaving. Like, I'm currently working on air in the industry, which is a very challenging and competitive thing to do, especially coming out of CSM. Like, a lot of their graduates remain in the sports media industry, but on air positions are like few and far between. That's why a lot of people venture outside of Toronto to get their experience and to pad up that resume. But I didn't really know what I expect. I didn't have any grandiose delusions of being like, oh, I'm going to go. And I think a lot of people do have that because they don't understand work ethic. But like, you gotta put your time in. Like, I didn't have any delusions of like, oh, I'm going to go to CSM, next stop Sportsnet desk, next stop Sports Center. Like, would that have been awesome to be discovered out of CSM? Absolutely. But would I necessarily have been ready? Probably not. Right. And so I don't even know if Sports Center is my end goal. Like, maybe it is. Maybe it's another show that we haven't heard of. Maybe it's something on a streaming platform that we haven't heard of. So it's a wide open right now. Like, I'm loving what I do here in Winnipeg, and I'm just enjoying where I'm at right now.
Where in Winnipeg do you live?
I live in downtown. So I
And
live right by the station. I'm not far from the station.
And how have you found your experience with getting around town, the area where you live, compared to when you were in Toronto?
Well, I was never driving in Toronto because I never had to, right? Like, I live right on the subway line, so everything was super close, and I would walk a lot of places, especially in the summer. And here I like to walk too, but obviously everything's so spread apart. So if I need to actually go somewhere far, like, obviously I'm going to drive. But yeah, I wasn't even driving. I actually didn't even have my license at the time. I got my license. Actually, it's a funny story. My license, they told me I needed to have my license to have my first job. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. But I was terrified to drive, like terrified. And so I failed my driver's test like 3 times. I was so anxious about it. And then finally, when I got my license, it was like they had to extend my start date because I kept failing my license. The first time I was in a vehicle without like my mom or a driving instructor beside me, it was in a news vehicle. Like the first, yeah. So I was just like, yeah, I can get it. And so I was like on my way to a football stadium, so excited. And I'm on it. It's just my GPS was like, merge onto blah, blah, blah highway. And I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing it. Like, and I was so scared. I think I was like, scared. I was like, ah.
That was in Lethbridge?
That was in Lethbridge, yeah. And so I get around fine now. Like, I was a traffic reporter for up until very recently. I was doing traffic here. And so, yeah, I like to put myself into terrifying positions. Like, even that, it was like being a traffic reporter in a city that I didn't know. Like, insanity. Like, someone described it to me as like singing the words to a song that you've never heard.
I've always found that interesting because whenever I see job ads about on air, traffic reporter, must know the city well and must know the routes and all these sorts of things. But is that necessarily true? Or was your demo tape just so good and they were like, well, whatever, we'll take a chance on this girl?
That's probably true. Like you probably should know how to get around. Like that's probably recommended at best. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would make my traffic reports very personality driven, unless it was a collision, in which case, like serious business. But yeah, and you know what though, like there's been people actually who have DM'd me who are taking on a traffic role, who are in a similar position of like, I just took on a traffic role, I don't know. And I was like, look, this is what you're gonna have to do. Like, here's your resources. Like, there are people who will help you, but it is not easy at all.
What was the hardest thing about doing traffic reporting?
Um, well, you don't like, as you might know, like a lot of people don't have a videographer with them mostly, right? So you're reporting live on something on your own. And so you're arriving on scene, you're figuring out what's going on, and then all of your hits are timed. So you're figuring out how to get there on time to do your hit, setting up, and then once you're there, you have to speak. So it's like by the time you're set up, you need to think, okay, what am I going to say? And so aside from my initial, inauguration of like, I don't know where I'm at to, okay, now you have to talk about it. Like, I guess the first learning curve was the hardest, but then even after meeting those deadlines and having a good report, despite maybe inclement weather, maybe especially weather, a highway collision is the most challenging I'd find, because if you're sending me to Maine and whatever, I can find that. But if you're sending me to a pin on a map on the highway, you can't just stop. Like, you're on the highway, you're going into something that people are telling you to leave, like that they're trying to direct people out of, and you're like, oh, excuse me, how do I how do you figure out how to get into the traffic when they're trying to like divert people elsewhere? And then you have like your safety vest and you get out in it. Yeah, so that's definitely a challenge too, especially because you can't just stop. Like, you're on the highway, how do you stop? You have to basically figure out or pass it, which is the most frustrating thing ever, and then find a way to be like, okay, that's where it's at. How do I stop safely to get this collision?
When looking at a job like a traffic reporter, it doesn't seem like something that's super involving at the super involved, pardon me, at the surface. But when you just describe a lot of these elements of getting to the scene, knowing what you're going to say, doing it live, I think that's another element that's maybe a bit underrated, is doing it live and then having to, like, there's no do-overs, right? It's not like you're taping this and you can screw up and keep trying over and over. It's a lot harder than it looks, I think.
Yeah, everybody likes to watch the finished product of something and make their opinions on it, right? It's easy to watch from home and be like, oh, like that person didn't do a good job or whatever. But yeah, you only see the finished product. And I mean, that can be said for other positions in a newsroom where it's like, you don't see what I'm doing to get to this point. So there's a lot of communication involved. Like, this is where I'm at. This is what my capacity is. This is what I can do from what I'm looking at. And then the live component is just like, it's like jumping into cold water, right? You just do it. You just do it, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. You do it multiple times, and then you do it again the next day. So it's like, you can't really not avoid it, because you don't want to avoid it. We love what we do, but it's definitely something that it's not for the weak-hearted.
Was it something that you had envisioned doing potentially while you were in school or just after the fact, or was it a completely new opportunity that came out of the blue when you first graduated?
Traffic or reporting?
Doing traffic, like reporting is
Oh,
reporting.
traffic. There's no way that I ever in a million years thought I would be doing a traffic job. But there was more to it too. Like traffic was part of it for sure, but there was a lot of news elements. There was what we call pit stops where I would interview like local organizations live and do that. There was more newsy type elements. There was fun elements too. So definitely never thought I would be doing traffic, but there were a lot of elements that made sense.
That's that's the way of the industry, and that's the way it goes when you have to find any opportunity you can to get experience, right? Like when you look at, we're talking earlier about someone like Jay Ontright, like Jay didn't just go from, oh, I graduated from school and now here I am working on the desk at Sports Center. He was a breakfast television. He worked in Saskatoon. I think he also worked in Winnipeg. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that, but I mean, you would
Big
know.
Winnipeg fan.
Was he the one that convinced you that going to Winnipeg would be a good opportunity then?
Yeah. Yeah. He was like, you're going to absolutely love it there. Like, no doubt. Big fan. Lots of recommendations.
People say a lot of go Jets and go Bombers around town. What have you felt the sports scene like so far in your first initial experience in the great city of Winnipeg?
So I'm a huge football fan, like especially the CFL. I'm massive. Like I prefer to the CFL to the NFL. Really into football. And so I grew up thinking Saskatchewan was like this magical land. Like I'm not joking. As a small child, I grew up thinking like, wow, like I want to go there. Like that is where my people are. That is like, that seems like the best place on earth. They just play hockey and watch football. Like that's so cool. And so I actually have never been to a Riders game, even to this day. But, and when I went there, I just thought like, wow, this is so cool. Like everybody has like their Rider stickers. Everybody, you know, is really into this. And then I moved here and I like actually went to the Bomber games, which is okay. Apparently they call it Bomber games. I don't know. I thought it was Bombers, but it's Bomber game apparently.
Yeah, you're going to the Bomber game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that consciously, actually.
Yeah. Every time I hear it, I get corrected. I'm like, oh, sorry. But I actually went and it's unlike anything that I had imagined. Like it's just what I had imagined about Saskatchewan. I'm sure it's really similar. And that's why that rivalry is so hot, because it was just so cool. And like just the atmosphere and just being in a place that, you know, that people care about this, people want to watch football, people like actually follow the players. They actually, you know, like there's a Milt Stegall street, like
Milt Stegall Drive. There you
drive.
go.
Yeah. Like that's crazy to me. And
Ken
so,
Plain Way as well.
Yeah, just absurd. Like, yeah, I think that's a huge reason why I love this place. It's the sports scene. Like I've been to a couple Jets games. I'm not the biggest hockey fan. Like I say, wearing my Leafs sweatshirt. Right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Yeah.
I enjoy all sports for sure. But I've even like, I've been to a CJFL game here. Oh,
I can pause.
sorry. They needed to get in a building. I'm so sorry.
No worries here. Give me 1 second.
I'll just re-say the CJFL thing.
And we're in.
So I actually went to a CJFL game and I just want to experience that too, like junior football here, because people care about that more. I want to go to a Moose game. I want to go to an Ice game. Like those are all things that like matter to like a community. And I feel like it's such small town vibes here for a big city. Like people really care about the WHL, or people, you know, support the AHL team. Not that they don't in other communities, but I don't know. It's just like such a sports town, which I love. I keep calling it a town, which makes people really mad because they're like, it's a city. I'm like, I know, but
Winnipeg's bigger than Kitchener, so you can't call it a town. I'll just say that right now.
I
If the
know, I
place where you
know.
come from is smaller than Winnipeg, then you then you're from a town too. Then
The only reason I call it a town, that's not me being like, Toronto. That's me just because of the way that people are. Like it just has such a vibe of a small town, and everybody is somehow like, what is the term? Like degrees of separation.
6 degrees of separation. Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, like everybody somehow knows everybody, and it's confusing because there's a million people here. And like that's why I call it a town. But yeah, no, I love the sporting element of it, and I want to just take in as much as I can. Like I actually coach football as well here.
We coached the Greendale Falcons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your coaching experience like? Because football is pretty big in Manitoba, or maybe not as big as other places, but it's very popular.
No,
sure.
it's pretty big. Loved it. I'm coaching flag now, actually, and then I'm going to coach spring flag, and then I'm going to coach again in the summer. It was one of the best experiences of my life. Like so fun. The kids are great. They're young enough that they fear you a little bit. Like there's still that element of like, okay, an adult is talking to me, but they're old enough that they're starting to understand concepts and stuff. Like not all of them, it's half and half for sure, but they're old enough that they like are starting to get it. And that's just such a fun feeling because yeah, I just love being around football. So it makes me happy. I can talk about football every day.
Yeah, the CFL is definitely not as beloved here in the city of Toronto as maybe some people would like it to be, but Winnipeg carries the torch, Saskatchewan carries the torch, and even though the financial lifeblood of the CFL exists in Toronto, its fandom lifeblood exists in the rivalry between Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, because you see how big football is in the community at all levels. It's not just the professionally, the CJ, like Thunder and the Hilltops rivalry is huge in Saskatchewan. Rams, Huskies is huge. Riders, Bombers is huge. And even in Winnipeg, yeah, there's only one team, the Manitoba Bisons, but Bisons are still very popular, and they've done pretty well considering that they haven't had as many amazing things to advertise for all these years until IGF came along. And they even won a Vanier Cup in 2007 playing out of a garden shed that they only had access to for 6 months of the year. So people
Wow.
are built different in Manitoba. I'll say that. If you talk to Coach
Wow.
Dobie or do an interview with him, ask him about what was it like playing at University Stadium compared to the IGF. He will give you a lot of great nuggets of wisdom on that one.
I love that. I love that so much.
What attracted you to football? Because I mean, as people who follow the CFL, like they know that there's like a stereotypical demographic and the league is dying, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a game for everybody, and it's great that you love it. So what was it that made you enamored by Canadian football?
I actually played football growing up, all through like my childhood and then through high school. And I honestly would have played in university had I been a boy, like had the biological parts that, because at that point, like everyone's well past puberty and just physically there's weight training, and it's just my shoulders are not built the same way a man's are. Right. So it wasn't a matter of like my heart being like, I would have tried to go to the CFL if
No,
I
why
could
not?
have. Right. Why not? But like obviously it got to a point where like I couldn't physically do it anymore. And so yeah, even like I talked about my younger self thinking Saskatchewan was a magical land, but I genuinely thought like I could play in the CFL. Like,
I mean, it's kids got a dream, right? Like,
right. But so that's kind of like, football's been my whole world for many years. And so I've kind of just taken all of that from childhood into my adult life. And I know a weird amount about football. And like, I like the NFL too. I grew up a Cowboys fan, unfortunately. I hate them and everything they stand for, but that's kind of like how you feel about every franchise that that you love. Like, I love them, but I hate them all at once. So yeah, no, CFL, NFL. I haven't watched XFL or the USFL, but I just like football. I just like being around football. I've volunteered with multiple CJFL teams, coaching. Yeah, any way that I can be around the game is a good day.
Have you ever considered playing pit football in Winnipeg?
Pitfall. Oh, is that the women's league?
No, pit football is like an indoor touch league that they play in the winter and the
Oh,
summer. So like they have men's teams, there's co-ed, there is a women's division, I think, as well, if I'm not mistaken, but you might have to
okay.
fact check me on that. I played it for a handful of years with my friends, and they usually play just like 6 games, and they play at the WSF South, North, and then in the summer they play all over the city at outdoor parks because the fields are smaller, so it's really easy to go places where you don't need turf and uprights because there's no field goals or anything. So it's really fun it's a great way to stay involved in football without needing to play organized with full equipment and stuff as an adult and to relive glory days.
I had no idea. Yeah, probably. I don't have time. Like, I say yes to so many things, and then I get there and I'm like, oh, I also do stand-up comedy. And so it's been a challenge out here just because not getting on stage per se, but like the morning show happens in the morning, the night show happens at night, and just balancing the two. And then I'll do the club shows on weekends. So that, like, I don't think I'll have time to play football with coaching 3 times a week and stand up and work. And I like to write, and I do a lot of things. So I don't know if I could fit that in. And I do work out a couple times a week as well. So I'm just like, I don't know where that would fit.
I was even gonna say, like, you do so many things already. Like, how are you able to do them all? It just must be a crazy go schedule 24/7.
Yeah, it is busy. I like to keep busy though. It makes me feel good. Like, when you're doing what you love, it's almost like you don't notice it. Like, um, it's just fun. It's just what drives me. And like I said, football, it's just when you enjoy being around something, it doesn't feel like work at all.
So are you gonna try to be a sideline reporter then for the CFL in the next few years?
I wouldn't say no. I definitely wouldn't say no to that. That would be pretty awesome. I've had some interactions with Sarah Orleski, did you interview her? Yes, she's an absolute pro. Like, wow. Like, I'm so enamored by her. So I've had some conversations with her, and just wow. Like, if I could be anything close to what she does, would be pretty good company. So, um, yeah, that would be something. I don't have any like particular, I don't know how to explain it. Like, yes, I would totally do that. Is that my end goal? I'm not sure. Like, maybe it's something else, but I'd be happy to be around just football in general.
What got you into stand-up comedy?
That is something else too that I've been doing since I was really young. Like, it's one of those things that I started when I was like writing when I was 17. I think my first show when I was just 18. And so the show that I did I wasn't even legal to drink in the bar, the show that I did. So I had to like leave after. And so I don't know anything outside of comedy. Like, a lot of people who start in their adult life, they have experienced life before and then they do comedy, and it's like this new thing. Whereas I had started in my teenage years, and it really is a lifestyle. And so doing it outside of that, yeah, it's an interesting perspective because it's been a part of my life for so long, and it will never not be a part of my life. Like, I will always do comedy. And so it's another one of my loves, where it's just like, I want to be around it all the time.
Who are some of your favorite stand-up comedians?
I love Kevin Hart, very much. Like, I love how physical and silly he is. I love Chris Rock, which is great because they're both doing a tour together, which is like, how can you have so much greatness in one tour? Obviously Dave Chappelle, like everybody loves Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, Jim Carrey, Robin Williams. In terms of Canadian comics, I love, there's a guy named K. Trevor Wilson. He's super funny. There's a lot of like really good talent here in Canada too, which is like, you might not know their name, but like top notch here in Canada. They just don't have the mainstream fame perhaps that you'd think that they should have, but we just don't promote our superstars enough in Canada.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme amongst a lot of the great things we have here, unfortunately, and CFL being one of those as well. Like it's a league that goes under the rug and people just assume it's a development or it's a second fiddle or Dollarama to NFL, it's Costco, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of things as a CFL fan that I've uncovered through researching its history that have played in a significant role in the evolution of the game in the NFL. For example, the like empty gun offense and playing more spread, right? Like, or 4 receiver sets. John Hufnagel was a big innovator when using those offensive schemes in the late 90s, early 2000s before going to the NFL that teams have now eventually started to implement. There used to be a ton of I formation. And even when you look at the scrambling quarterback, the CFL had that long before the NFL. The Kyler Murrays and the Russell Wilsons of the world wouldn't exist without there being the Doug Flutys or the Jeff Garcias, and they dominated the game, and it changed the way that pro football was played in America, but people don't really acknowledge that. They just like to think that eventually they discovered it out of thin air. I don't know.
I was actually talking to Damon Allen about that. And I was like, what if you played in the modern day NFL? Like, how would you fare? And he was like, I'd be leading the league.
Well, of course he's gonna say he's a first ballot Hall of
He's
Fame.
like, the way I used to play, man, like the running quarter, like that wasn't like who I like, how I played, like it was ahead of his time for sure.
Yeah, Damon Allen was incredible, and he's a guy that should honestly be first ballot Hall of Fame or CFL, or I mean Canadian Football Hall of Fame, because you look at his passing records, his rushing records, like he was insane. And I don't think also that people can appreciate enough, unless you're a big fan of the league, then you would appreciate it, but how long he played as well. Like
23 seasons. Like I hosted an audio show with him for a while on, have you ever heard of Clubhouse?
Oh yeah, Clubhouse was like up and down in 5 months, unfortunately, it seemed like.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, that's when, because I mean, I guess because Twitter's adapted the whole live. Anyways, aside from that, I had a CFL club, and him and I every Monday would host the club. We'd have like coaches and players and trainers and agents and everyone. There's a lot of good football conversations. So yeah, that's another thing that I did.
Well, we are getting towards the end of our time on today's episode, so I do want to ask a few more wrap-up questions to have a little bit more fun before we go.
All right, let's hear it.
What is your favorite comedy movie?
Oh my gosh. The Other Guys.
Oh my goodness. That is an all-time classic. Super underrated.
Super underrated. And like, it's, for me, it's the subtleties and like the little lines for me in that film. Like oh man, I love that movie so much. Like every like little subtle line is almost funnier to me than the big line. Like I'll quote like random obscure lines from that movie and people will be like, what?
The hell's going on? 2 good men are dead. And you guys are all fighting about who's going to be the next big shot, right? Yes, that's exactly what we're fighting about.
I'm the winner. Everybody saw. See, it's those ones where it's just like that
Oh
what
my
you just said is the
goodness.
funny part, but then it's just like the extra like writing that's like sandwiched in there. So good.
Hey guys, don't go chasing waterfalls. That's a TLC reference, right? I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Okay. Oh man, it is so like you mentioned, the subtlety is what makes it so perfect. Like the dichotomy between Will Ferrell's smart stupidness and Mark Wahlberg's hot-headed but heart's in a good place personality, just it works so well. And Michael Keaton, it's actually really funny that you mentioned that movie, because who was it? I think it was Dan O'Toole, actually. We were talking about that literally the other day, talking about the other guys and how Michael Keaton is the perfect glue in that movie. Like someone who's so diverse in his roles, and how
Was that his favorite movie too?
he was. I said, what's one of your favorite comedy movies? And he mentioned the other guys. So
So good.
yeah, like it's,
So good.
and he goes like, I'm Jimmy. We're just walking. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Oh man, that is absolutely hilarious. I'm glad that you did bring that up, because it always brings a smile on my face whenever someone talks about the other guys. Okay, so what is your favorite or most memorable CFL game that you've watched? Could be on TV or in person.
Um, memorable in a good way or in a bad way?
Either or. It's
Okay, so
up to your
the
interpretation.
most memorable would have to be which Grey Cup was it? I want to say 2011? No, 20. I'm trying to remember the exact year. It's going to bother me. The one where Brandon Banks was called back on the
2014.
return. 2014. Yeah, that was the most memorable. It was really sad.
Really? Oh, I guess
Yeah.
as a growing up Tiger Cats
Yeah,
fan.
growing up a Ticats fan, because it was just like on one play, like we had it. We honestly had it, and to be called back on a, I don't even,
Block in the
stupid
back.
penalty, like
When you look back at the film, like it's not really debatable. Like when you see, because the thing is, I read an article talking about how this or Mark, the special teams coordinator from the Stamps, was saying that he had submitted film before that game, knowing that Hamilton always were very in the shades of gray area on doing a block in the back when they would run the reverse punt return. And
I saw that too.
it's sad for Tiger Cats fans, because they've now achieved the crown of the longest active droughts for not winning the Grey
And
Cup.
we've been in the show so many times. It's just so close. Like,
And they lost the Grey Cup a few years in a row there. I think it was 2013, 2014, and then they also lost in 2019 and the 2021. So they've lost like 4 times in the last 7 years, 8 years, and it's just it's unfortunate for them, because even like Zach Collaros, I remember he was so good that year and was very underrated, and ended up winning the Grey Cup with the right team in the end. So I think that all's well that ends well for Collaros, but for Ticats fans, I'll have to continue to wait.
I plead the fifth.
That's you, and as you are allowed to do so. I was literally just thinking of exactly what the next thing I was going to say was, but it slipped my mind as we started talking about CFL Grey Cups. Oh my goodness. Got me tripping now. Oh man. What's the best Ticats home game you've been to?
It was at, I can't remember. It was just as a kid, and it was at Ivor Wynne Stadium. And I can just remember it was just like a random game, but it was really fun. I remember Henry Burris got hurt in the game. He broke something, which is a terrible thing. I would never hope that on anyone. But I just remember that being like one of my favorite games. So no particular, it wasn't like a Grey Cup or anything. It was just like being around football when I was like 10.
Yeah, I think we all have all CFL fans who have been exposed to the game for a long time have those memories of random games against maybe they remember the team, but they don't remember the results or the gear.
Yeah, I don't even remember if we won or not. That's crazy.
Yeah, the last
I
game at
just
Ivor
remember
Wynn.
as a good memory, and I remember Henry Burris getting hurt.
Yeah,
Not that that's not a good memory. Those two didn't.
yeah. I remember when Henry Burris would always tear up the Bombers, this when he was on the Ticats in the late 2000s. That was not fun for Winnipeg fans, but fun for Ticats fans because he was really good.
Yeah.
And even speaking of which, the last game at Ivor Wynn Stadium ever played was in 2012 against Winnipeg. I remember watching that and I was like, man, like this, like the Bombers they were so bad that year. It was so sad to watch. And the Tiger Cats crushed them. And it wasn't until the end that they threw a touchdown pass to make it look close. But how times have changed in the last 10 years since that happened. It doesn't even seem like that.
I know, right?
Holy. The final question, the final question I want to ask you is, if you had the chance to interview any athlete who's still currently playing in any sport you'd like, who would it be?
Wow. That's such a hard question. And they have to be currently playing.
You can narrow it down to a certain sport if that makes it easier too.
It'd be easier if you could tell me the sport, because then I could.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of like iconic people. I don't even
Football.
like tennis, but I'm like Serena Williams or like LeBron James. Like I would want to actually like be the best.
Okay. Maybe NFL. One NFL player you can interview.
Okay. I'm sorry this is taking me so long. There's just so many. Like the first name that comes to mind is Tony Romo,
Really?
but like he's not currently playing.
Yeah.
But I feel like he'd be such a good interview. I know that that's against your rule, but probably Tony Romo.
Tony Romo he's a super intelligent football mind, and
Yeah.
we've seen that in the last several years on CBS, and he's and deservedly so for his big contract. Like he's really accelerated the entertainment value of broadcasts.
He's like a teacher that you can just tell loves their job. And like, it's like football for dummies every day, but I learned so much just by listening to him call a game. And yeah, so it'd be both the combination of like talking about football and being entertained at the same time.
And one more for the record, just if you were to interview anyone in the CFL right now, who do you think would be the most interesting interview?
Oh, probably, this is a weird question. You're not going to expect my answer. I'm going to say two.
Okay.
Nathan Rourke, because he's Canadian and he's got his shot. Like, I think that's really interesting that he's like the number one guy, he's Canadian. And two, Duron Carter, because somehow that's the surprising one, because I have interviewed him before. And it's interesting that he's somehow found himself back in the league. And he's just I'll just say an interesting interview. And so he'll always be an interesting interview, but to add that with the fact that he's been out of the league for a while and then to come back in, I can't even imagine the sound bites you'd get from that.
Oh yeah, that is, I'm not surprised at it, because as a person who's watched Duron Carter play from the times in Montreal to Calgary, or I'm sorry, against Calgary, I should say, for Saskatchewan, to playing DB and taking a pick to the house on Bo Levi Mitchell in Calgary. Oh man, there's just so much there. And he, especially with the fact that his dad is Chris Carter, like there's just, the layers are so deep. It's insane.
In my interview with him, he was like, this is a terrible impression of him, but he was like, Duron pushed a coach. Duron got in a fight. There was 5 fights that day.
Oh man, he's definitely a great character to interview. I can only imagine.
Oh, I'm like, all right.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't get in a fight with you, it's like that's the only thing I'm asking for, man. Like you can say whatever you like.
I'll just give you the attention that you crave, but I'm just here for a good soundbite. That's so funny.
Well, with that, Ainsley, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was really great getting to chat with you and getting to know a little bit more perspective from someone who has gone from the big city to the small or to the big town, I guess I should say, because Winnipeg is not so small, but it is a town in your eyes. So I appreciate you being able to be on. It was really fun chatting.
Yes, thanks so much. The big town. I like that. The big town. I'm going to keep calling it that. Appreciate this conversation.
And thank you to the listener for enjoying today's episode with CTV Live reporter in Winnipeg, Ainsley McPhail.